Hi everyone, this is the QA-DAO Transcription Service proposal from Fund 7 brought to you by QA-DAO, and here's a link to us on IdeaScale, and this is our closing report. First off, let's have a look at the project details in brief. The project was called QA-DAO Transcription Service, and that's the IdeaScale link there, and the project ID. The project budget was $39,053, and the challenge was the Community Events Challenge in Fund 7. And the dates that the project ran were March 22 to June 23. The main aim of the proposal was to either fully transcribe or to summarise key meetings and events in the Catalyst ecosystem. And the intention was to make them more accessible, to help the community keep track of stuff, and to capture them for posterity. And also, the project intended to trial different approaches to transcribing and documentation and write a report on best practice. And the idea of that was to help improve this work in the future. So here's what we actually did. You can see here a link to a log of all the meetings and documentation work that we did. And this is also a link to our best practice methodologies report on our GitBooks, so have a read of that. A key achievement of the proposal was just being there to offer responsive and thorough documentation when the community needed it. Some examples of this are documenting the flood of meetings that came about around SIP 1694 and supporting the community to have access to that information about the SIP at a range of different levels of knowledge. So there was a lot of meetings going on and we were there to be able to capture them. Another example is that we were there to document the 4 DREP information sessions that IOG held in June and September 2022. So we did that in collaboration with IOG, and I think it was useful that there was a funded project there that could respond to that need for documentation. Another example is this project picked up the extra work on documenting Circle v3 when Circle moved from fortnightly to weekly meetings. There was an extant project called Oversight of Catalyst Circle which was doing that documentation, but its work was doubled when the meetings went from fortnightly to weekly, so this proposal was there to pick up the shortfall. Things we learned from this proposal. Well, first off, I think it's something we all know anyway, is that things move pretty fast in Catalyst. And actually, most of what we do is ephemeral and almost disposable unless we make it otherwise by capturing and documenting it. We found that documenting and transcribing in itself, just by doing it, gives a certain solidity and permanence to people's work in Catalyst, and it enhances the community's capacity for reflection, learning and engagement. If you've got it there, captured and archived and documented, it seems to make it more solid and less disposable, which I think is just good for people's heads as well. Otherwise you can feel that all the work you're doing is just throwaway. Another learning point is that the single most valuable documentation process that you can do for a community like Catalyst anyway is probably timestamping videos. We've tried a lot of different approaches to documentation, and this I think is the one that is the most suitable in Catalyst. So much of Catalyst's work is captured on video, and without good descriptive timestamping, all those videos are almost completely inaccessible, because I think we all know if you're confronted with an hour or 2 hour long video, you won't watch it unless there are timestamps to help you find the information you need. So in this particular community, if you do nothing else, timestamp. That's not to say that other forms of documentation are not valuable for particular kinds of meeting, but across the board, timestamping seems to be the one. Another learning point was to do effective transcription or summary. People do actually need a really high level of skill in the language that the material is in, and in Catalyst that's usually English. We did hope to find that this wasn't the case and that people with lower levels of English could effectively do transcription or summary, but unfortunately we found that that wasn't the case. To summarise or annotate well, people additionally we found, need a really good understanding of the topic of the meeting. But it is possible to do just transcription rather than summary and annotation, with less in-depth knowledge about what the meeting's about. So that might be a useful thing when assessing who can do a task without huge headaches for them. It's worth noting that useful documentation is rarely just copying out what was said. There's usually an element of organising and structuring the material which requires a certain level of understanding to make it accessible. Next steps coming out of this proposal. Will there be future documentation work from QA-DAO? At the moment, we have no follow-on documentation proposal in the pipeline, but we might look at this for Fund 11. This proposal has certainly demonstrated the value of having documentation funded and available, ready to respond to community need. Possibly a future proposal would address training new documenters, because we see that as a real need in the community. Meanwhile, we'll certainly be available to offer informal support and advice on documentation to anybody who wants it. And, we'd love to swap ideas with people who are doing documentation as well. In the longer term, we'd love to see future proposers including a budget line in their proposal to cover some form of documentation. It's something that people often leave off and think that maybe they'll cobble together, but we've found what a skilled task it is and how much you need to plan for it. So we'd love to see proposals doing that. Ultimately, perhaps Catalyst needs an archives of the kind that QA-DAO has been developing in the SNet ecosystem, and that link takes you to the SNet Ambassadors archive. So have a look at that and just see how interesting it is and how powerful a tool it can be for capturing what work has been done. Just going to end with some useful links. There's the project's GitBook, where some of the documentation is held, and also our report on methodologies and best practice is held. But then also some of the project outputs are held in the Ekphrasis GitBook, where they're more appropriate, so you can find those there. There's QA-DAO's YouTube, where you'll find a lot of the videos that we timestamped and archived. And this is an output spreadsheet, which I've mentioned earlier, for the work that this project actually did. And all that remains to say is thank you for watching.